We're waiting to hear from Governor John Bel Edwards about the possibility of moving towards Phase 3. Today, a press conference is scheduled where he is expected to address it. Jade Cunningham joins us live now with more. Jade, good morning.
Well, good morning, Leslie. Many people are curious to see what Governor John Bel Edwards will do because, sure, there are people who say that the state is ready to move into Phase 3, but there are also a lot of people who say that we shouldn't even be in Phase 2, that right now Louisiana is just moving way too fast, moving forward with the coronavirus. Now, Edwards, though, also keeping a close eye lately on the state's case numbers. He is concerned, though, about some of the spikes that are being reported across the state. You know, we are seeing clusters in certain areas. There was a Tigerland incident a few days ago where people have been quarantining after many tested positive. Some of the LSU players we know of testing positive. You know, a graduation party here locally. And so while we are seeing those clusters, the cases are mainly community spread, which is why it is so important for people to practice those measures against the coronavirus. Now, some residents worry about moving into Phase 3, saying right now they are just not seeing a lot of people taking those precautions seriously. You know, they're not practicing social distancing. They're becoming complacent with it, not wearing masks. And basically, people have resumed to normal life, so to speak, which is concerning to officials who say that this highly contagious virus is still very much within our community. So Phase 2, of course, is set to expire Friday here in Louisiana. And again, we are waiting to hear from Governor John Bel Edwards what that means and what the next steps are. And hopefully we'll get some of those answers at today's press conference. Reporting live, Jade Cunningham, Eyewitness News.
Jade, thank you very much. Just another reminder, as Jade just mentioned, later today, Governor John Bel Edwards expects to announce what direction Louisiana will take with reopening this weekend. That press conference will be at 2:30 this afternoon. You can watch it right here on Channel 4 or on our website or Facebook Live. In case you forgot or need a refresher, here's a breakdown of the Phase 2 restrictions, which are set to expire this Friday. Right now, you're encouraged to still stay at home except for essential needs. If you plan on being near people, wear a face mask. Bars are allowed to be open at 25% capacity, while restaurants can now be at 50% capacity. For a full list of restrictions, go to our website, wwltv.com.